Chapter 22, Development and Aging. Fertilization is the process where the egg meets the sperm. It is designed to block a condition known as polyspermy. Polyspermy would be the fertilization of one egg by several sperm. Sperm chromatin reforms into a so-called sperm pronucleus inside the head of the sperm. The secondary oocyte, meanwhile, completes meiosis and its chromatin is contained within the egg pronucleus. There is a singular nuclear envelope that surrounds both pronuclei during fertilization, and cell division begins almost immediately. Several sperm make the journey, but only one completes it. If polyspermy did occur, the zygote would have too many chromosomes, which would cause abnormal development. As soon as the sperm touches the oocyte, its plasma membrane depolarizes from negative 65 millivolts to positive 10 millivolts, and this prevents the binding of any other sperm, period. Then the oocyte releases substances that lead to lifting of the zona pellucida away from the surface of the oocyte. This prevents the sperm from binding to the zona pellucida also, period. Early stages of animal development include cleavage. Cleavage is cell division without growth. This increases the number of cells in the zygote, but not the total volume of the cytoplasm. The divisions of the zygote are equal. This forms a multicellular stage called the morula, or a ball of cells. Next we have the formation of the clastula, which is a hollow ball of cells. The fluid-filled cavity is called a blastocele. During early gastrulation, certain cells begin to push or invaginate into the blastocele, creating a double layer of cells. This creates two layers, an ectoderm, which is the outer layer of cells, and an endoderm, which is the inner layer of cells. The pore created by the invagination is called the blastopore. The endoderm lines the archenteron, which is another name for the primitive gut. During the late gastrula stage, there are three layers of cells. A middle mesoderm layer has formed. And here's your picture. This picture compares a lancelet, which was a fish, in picture A, with a frog in letter B, and a chick in picture C. All three are in the late gastrula stage. You can see the endoderm, ectoderm, and mesoderm. Table 22.1 in the book discusses the embryonic germ layers and what they become. The processes of animal development include different steps. One of those is cellular differentiation. During cellular differentiation, cells become specialized in structure and function. During morphogenesis, the shape and form of the body are produced. And during pattern formation, the tissues and organs are arranged precisely within the body. For human development, there are approximately 9 months. It's customary to calculate the time of birth by adding 280 days to the start of the last menstrual period. However, only about 5% of babies actually arrive on the forecasted date. Human development is divided into embryonic development, which are the first 2 months. During this time, all organ systems develop, and fetal development, which are the remaining months 3 through 9. During these months, there is a refinement of the organ systems. During the first week, fertilization has occurred. Remember, fertilization occurs within the first third of the oviduct. During this time, the zygote undergoes the first cleavage divisions as it migrates through the oviduct towards the uterus. After about 3 days, it's in the morula stage. The morula is not much larger than the zygote because, even though it has undergone multiple divisions, the cells are just dividing and not growing. At day 5, it has become a blastocyst. The blastocyst has a fluid-filled cavity, the outer layer or trophoblast, and an inner layer. The inner layer cell mass becomes the embryo, the place where the embryonic stem cells arrive. The diagram shows the pathway of the egg traveling from the ovary through the oviduct and into the uterus. Along the way, you can see the cleavage, which again is growth, or division without growth, and also the implantation inside of the uterus. The embryo is now about the size of a period at the end of a sentence, at the beginning of the second week. Implantation occurs. Trophoblast cells secrete a digestive enzyme to burrow into the endometrium, or the lining of the uterus. The trophoblast cells also begin to secrete human chorionic gonadotropin, or HCG. HCG is the basis of the pregnancy test and serves to maintain the corpus luteum past the time it normally disintegrates. This maintains the endometrium and menstruation does not occur. The inner cell mass detaches itself from the trophoblast. The amnion and yolk sac develop. The yolk sac serves no nutritional purpose in humans as it does in chicks and other organisms, but it is the site of blood cell formation. The amnion has a cavity where the embryo and fetus develop. Also, gastrulation occurs. The inner cell mass now becomes the flattened embryonic disc. At this stage, the ectoderm and endoderm differentiate. The embryonic disc elongates to form the primitive streak, and mesoderm develops. The third week of embryonic development is a noteworthy week. During the third week, the nervous system begins as a thickening along the entire dorsal length of the embryo. Then, as an invagination, the neural folds appear. The neural folds meet in the middle, where they form the neural tube. This will develop into the brain and the spinal cord. The heart development also begins during the third week. The heart begins as a right and left heart tube that fuse and begin pumping blood. At 4 weeks, the baby is the size of the printed text in your book. The body stalk, or mesoderm, connects the tail end of the embryo with the chorion. The chorion has projections called chorionic villi, which are shaped like trees. Allantois is contained within this stalk. The umbilical cord has developed, and limb buds appear as little flippers. The hands and feet become apparent. The head enlarges, and it's possible to make out the developing eyes, ears, and nose, making these sense organs distinguishable. The diagram shows the human embryonic development for the first few weeks. At first, the embryo contains no organs, only tissues. The amniotic cavity is above the embryonic disc, and the yolk sac is below. The chorion develops villi, the structures so important to the exchange between the mother and the child. The allantois and yolk sac are positioned inside the body stalk as it becomes the umbilical cord. At 35 plus days, the embryo has a head region and a tail region. The umbilical cord takes blood vessels between the embryo and the chorion, or placenta. The human embryo at the beginning of the fifth week resembles the embryo of other vertebrates such as the fish, the frog, and the chick. You can see the brain starting to develop in the head region here, and the optic vesicles, which will become the eyes. You can also make out the limb buds and that post-anal tail. And don't forget the umbilical vessel, which is going to develop into the placenta. During weeks 6 through 8, the embryo becomes recognizable as a human. The nervous system continues to develop and reflexes are present, especially the startle reflex to touch. The neck region develops and the brain also continues to develop. All organ systems are now established. At the end of this time, the embryo is approximately 38 millimeters or 1.5 inches in length, and weighs no more than an aspirin tablet. We now begin fetal development in the 3rd and 4th months. Head growth begins to slow down and the rest of the body increases in length. However, the head is large, the nose is flat, and the eyes are far apart. Epidermal structures develop as well. Eyelashes, hair on the head, eyebrows, fingernails, and nipples are all going to form. Cartilage begins to be replaced by bones. Cartilage remains at the ends of the long bones, and ossification is not complete until between the ages of 18 and 20 years old. The skull has 6 large membranous areas called fontanelles. Sex can be determined in the 3rd month. However, the testes in male babies do not descend until the last trimester. In the 4th month, the heartbeat can be detected. And by the end of this 4th month, the fetus is approximately 152 millimeters, or 6 inches long, and weighs about 171 grams, or 6 ounces. And here's your picture of a 3 to 4 month old fetus. Movements begin as a fluttering sensation during this time, but those are replaced by kicks, punches, etc. as the limbs begin to grow and develop. The fetus is in the fetal position with the head bent down and in contact with the flexed knees. Vernix caseosa probably protects the delicate skin from the amniotic fluid and looks like a cheesy substance covering the baby's body. The length is now approximately 30 millimeters. In the 5th month, the length is now approximately 300 millimeters, or 12 inches, and the weight is approximately 1,380 grams, or 3 pounds. During this 5th and 6th month, the fetal skin is also going to be covered by a fine hair called laguno, which tends to fall out after the baby is born. The eyelids are open, and survival is possible if birth occurs at this time. During fetal development, circulation provides nutrients and oxygen for the baby, as well as removes the wastes. The fetus does not use its lungs for gas exchange. Blood entering the right atrium is shunted through the left atrium through an oval opening known as the foramen ovale. Any blood that enters the right ventricle ends up being shunted into the aorta by way of the arterial duct, or the ductus arteriosus. Blood in the aorta is distributed to the iliac arteries, leading to the placenta. The umbilical arteries and vein run alongside each other in the umbilical cord, which is cut at birth, leaving the umbilicus, or navel. This umbilical cord facilitates the exchange of gases and nutrients between the fetus and the mother. Blood leaves the placenta through the umbilical vein. It enters the fetal liver and joins the venous duct, which merges with the inferior vena cava. The inferior vena cava returns the blood to the heart. And here's our diagram. At birth, blood in the left atrium causes a flap of skin to cover the oval opening. The arterial duct closes as endothelial cells proliferate. Remains of the arterial duct and umbilical vessels are converted to connective tissue. The most common cardiac defects in newborns is that the oval opening fails to close. This causes blue baby. Failure to close can generally be corrected by surgery if the opening is large enough. If the opening is small, they generally let it close on its own, which usually happens during the first 2 years of life. The placenta has a fetal portion, contributed by the chorion, and a maternal portion, consisting of uterine tissues. It is attached to the uterine wall by allantois and the chorionic villi. The placenta is fully formed by the 10th week. By now, it produces progesterone and estrogen. It functions in gas, nutrient, and waste exchange between the fetal and the maternal circulatory systems. However, the fetal and maternal blood generally does not mix. The umbilical cord functions to take fetal blood to and from the placenta. It's important to know that harmful substances such as alcohol and medications can cross the placenta and cause irreversible birth defects. There is a diagram that shows fetal development and risk.
Nutritional status of a woman before conception is important. The fertilized egg is not very susceptible to toxic agents. Any trauma at this stage will result in a termination of the pregnancy, most often unnoticed by the mother. Once the embryo attaches to the uterus wall, it will begin its growth in earnest. The cells are still not susceptible to nutritional deficiencies or...
Do what? I'll be right back. Is that on?
It's
Nutritional status of a woman before conception is important. The fertilized egg is not very susceptible to toxic agents. Any trauma at this stage will result in a termination of the pregnancy, most often unnoticed by the mother. Once the embryo attaches to the uterus wall, it will begin its growth in earnest. The cells are still not susceptible to nutritional deficiencies or other dangers from the health and lifestyle choices of the mother. The embryo continues to be susceptible to radiation-induced birth defects. These include cataracts, reduced growth, skeletal defects, microphthalmia, microcephaly, and mental retardation. At 3 weeks, the embryo begins to form the rudimentary organs of the fetus. The embryo is now sensitive to nutritional inadequacies. At this stage, early alcohol exposure can lead to non-viability of the fetus and spontaneous abortion, or fetal alcohol syndrome in the resulting newborn. Other risks are presented by high intakes of vitamin A, medications and prohibited drugs, and trauma. The development of the central nervous system continues for 16 weeks, so the central nervous system is at high risk throughout that period. At 4 to 5 weeks, the central nervous system, heart, limbs, eyes, and ears are all developing and readily affected by inadequate nutritional status. For the heart and limbs, risks diminish after 6 weeks. For eyes and ears, the risks continue for 8 and 9 weeks longer. After 9 weeks, some of these risks diminish. By 6 weeks, the heart is beating, the eyes and limb buds are present. This period shows high risk for major structural abnormalities to the central nervous system, eyes, ears, palate, and teeth, and moderate risk to the heart and limbs. The first trimester is the period when the fetus is most susceptible. The high risk to the palate appears to be limited from 6 to 9 weeks, while risk to the teeth and genitalia continue right through to term. At 8 weeks, the fetus is about 1 inch long. Note the lengthening of the limbs. The risks at this stage are physiological defects and minor structural abnormalities. In the second trimester, undernutrition has a greater effect on the mother than on the fetus. However, hereditary diseases and prescription and recreational drugs are still a danger. At 16 weeks, the fetus is 6 inches long. Physiological defects and minor structural abnormalities are still the major forms of risk, with moderate risk to the central nervous system, eyes, teeth, and external genitalia. 26 weeks marks the end of the second trimester. During the third trimester, the fetus will gain the most weight, up to 5 or more pounds, and increase in size. A major risk during this time is premature delivery. Preterm infants have a good chance of survival if properly cared for. If undernutrition has happened, then the chance of the infant's survival goes down proportionally to the extent of undernutrition. At 38 weeks, the fetus is near birth, weighs 7 to 9 pounds, and is about 20 inches long. 2 widely accepted criteria for a successful pregnancy are 1, a gestation period of longer than 37 weeks, and 2, a birth weight of more than 5.5 pounds. The longer the gestation period and the greater the birth weight, the less likely that medical problems will occur. Sound nutrition during pregnancy is insurance against problems in both of these key criteria.
The next section of the chapter focuses on birth. Contractions occur throughout the third trimester and become stronger and more frequent towards the end of the pregnancy. The first contractions are light, lasting about 20 to 30 seconds and occurring every 15 to 20 minutes. True labor is marked by uterine contractions that occur regularly every 10 to 15 minutes and last for 40 seconds or longer. These are known as labor pains. A positive feedback mechanism is involved. During this process, the stretching of the uterus causes oxytocin, a hormone, to be released from the pituitary gland. Oxytocin causes further contractions, which causes the uterus to be stretched further. More oxytocin is then released. Shortly before birth, strong uterine contractions occur about every 5 minutes. The water breaks, meaning the amnion has ruptured and the amniotic fluid is released. A mucus plug, which blocks the opening of the uterus or the cervix, is expelled. Most people do not notice the expulsion of the mucus plug unless it's mixed with blood. The function of this plug is to prevent bacteria and sperm from entering the vagina during pregnancy. Labor, patrician, or birth, is divided into 3 phases. At first, the uterine contractions occur in such a way that the cervical canal slowly disappears as the lower part of the uterus is pulled upward towards the baby's head. This is called effacement, or taking up the cervix. The first stage ends once the cervix is dilated completely. During the second stage, the uterine contractions come every 1 to 2 minutes and last about a minute. They are accompanied by an urge to bear down or push. Babies are usually born face down, head first. If the vaginal orifice does not expand enough to allow for passage of the head, an episiotomy or incision in the vagina may occur and be sewn up later. As soon as the head is delivered, the baby's shoulders rotate so that the baby faces either right or left. One shoulder emerges first, then the other. The rest of the baby follows easily. Once the baby is breathing normally, the cord is cut and tied, severing the child from the placenta. The stump of the cord shrivels and leaves the scar or navel. Stage 3 of birth occurs when the afterbirth is delivered, usually within 15 minutes of delivery. The uterus contracts and shrinks, which dislodges the placenta. Another important milestone after birth is the female lactation process. The same hormones that affect the mother's breasts can also affect the baby's breast tissue. Sometimes babies can secrete a small amount of milk for a few days. The female breast contains 15 to 25 lobules. A lobule has a milk duct which branches from the nipple into the numerous smaller ducts that terminates in alveoli. During pregnancy, the number of ducts and alveoli increase. A hormone known as prolactin stimulates milk synthesis. It also inhibits the production of estrogen and progesterone. When placenta is delivered, the anterior pituitary begins to produce prolactin. However, this generally takes a few days. The first secretions are known as colostrum, which is thin and watery, but rich in protein and antibodies. Continued milk production requires a suckling child. The suckling stimulus causes oxytocin to be released. Oxytocin causes milk letdown into the ducts. Development continues throughout the stages of life, which are divided into infancy, childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Aging encompasses these progressive changes, which contribute to an increased risk of infirmity, disease, and death. In the next half century, the number of people over the age of 65 will increase by 147%. Gerontology is the study of aging. There are different hypotheses about aging. The first of those is genetic in origin. Cells divide a specific number of times. This is species-specific. Some cell lines become non-functional before the maximum number of divisions occur. This may be due to mutations that accumulate and affect the function. For this reason, children of long-lived parents tend to live longer than children of shorter-lived parents. Another hypothesis about aging is known as the whole body process. The whole body process states that there is a decline in hormonal systems that affect many different organs. This could also be due to a change in the specific tissue type that affects many organs. Cross-linkages in collagen fibers lead to stiffness and decreased elasticity. A final hypothesis about aging is known as extrinsic factors. Extrinsic factors could be that what we view as aging is actually the result of poor life choices in nutrition and habits. Sensible diet and exercise may prevent many signs of aging. As we age, there are several effects on different body systems. The older you become, the skin becomes thinner, less elastic, and your subcutaneous fat layer disappears. This causes wrinkles to appear on the skin and decreased insulation. The number of oil glands is reduced and the skin becomes dry. Pigmented blotches known as age spots may also appear. Aging also affects the processing and transport systems. Cardiovascular disorders are the leading cause of death. As you age, your heart shrinks because of a reduction in the cardiac muscle cell size. Your arteries become more rigid, and plaque buildup may narrow the lumen of the vessels. Also, your blood pressure is going to increase as you age. Your blood flow to the liver becomes reduced, and the liver doesn't metabolize drugs as quickly. Therefore, you start to take smaller doses of medications as you age. Blood supply to the kidneys will also become reduced. Salt and water balance become difficult to maintain. Therefore, elderly people dehydrate more quickly than younger people. The systems responsible for integration and coordination are also affected by age. Your brain and muscle cells do not replace lost cells, and neurons in the cerebral cortex are lost. Generally, cognitive functions are not affected in normal aging. Short-term memory skills may decrease. If the neurons do die, it may be due to decreased oxygen availability and not from aging. There will also be a loss of skeletal muscle mass. However, this may be prevented by exercise. Another disorder that may be prevented by exercise is osteoporosis. And finally, reproductive systems will be influenced by the aging process as well. Females undergo menopause, where the body no longer responds to the gonadotropic hormones that are released from the pituitary gland, and they stop menstruating. As males age, they produce less androgens or testosterone. However, they can still produce sperm until death. Generally, females tend to live longer than males. On average, it's approximately 8 years.